Hello everyone, it's good to be sharing this time again. It's been quite a week, hasn't it, in our community and around the world. And so it's especially important and significant time that we come together with God and with one another. It'll be important too as we gather for morning tea over our Zoom session later to catch up with one another. I look forward to seeing you then. And if you haven't got the link, just contact Carol Ann so that all of us can join together. And then we'll share together in communion too. So I look forward to sharing that time with you.
Today's reading is from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. Jesus walks on the water. Then Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people away. After sending the people away, he went up a hill by himself to pray. When evening came, Jesus was there alone, and by this time the boat was far out into the lake, tossed about by the waves, because the wind was blowing against it. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came to the disciples, walking on the water. When they saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and screamed with fear. Jesus spoke to them at once. "Courage," he said. "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then Peter spoke up. "Lord, if it is really you, order me to come out onto the water to you." "Come," answered Jesus. So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water to Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he was afraid and started to sink down into the water. "Save me, Lord," he cried. At once, Jesus reached out and grabbed hold of him and said, "How little faith you have! Why did you doubt?" They both got into the boat, and the wind died down. Then the disciples in the boat worshipped Jesus. "Truly you are the Son of God," they exclaimed. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
The early church, like us, really liked the story that we read this morning about the disciples being in the boat in the midst of a storm. You know, there's stories like this in every gospel, sometimes a couple. The key part of all these stories is not only that the disciples are in a threatening situation, but that Jesus comes to them, sometimes walking across the water and always calming the storm. They were frightening storms. The early church had plenty of frightening storms. They had persecution from all sorts of places, from Rome and from parts of the Jewish temple. And they wondered what to do. But they kept rereading these stories and remembering that Jesus does come to us and is with us in the midst of these storms. And so today, the storm outside is inconvenient, but the bigger storms are different, aren't they? It might be the unseen virus that not only threatens people, but puts people out of work, makes us come home, stay at home, makes us worry. There are other things too. This painting, for example, Chris's father painted. He painted this picture of a storm because he'd been told that his wife might not make it through an operation. And so he went down and started to paint this painting. So there are all sorts of storms we go through: physical and mental illness, job insecurity, family and personal conflict. So what does the story of Jesus and the storm have to do with all of them? The key thing is, first of all, God doesn't guarantee that we don't go through any storms in our life. In fact, he guarantees that we will have the same number as anyone else. And the disciples back then had to cope with the storm not only on the Lake Galilee, But the early disciples had to cope with storms that threatened them and their loved ones. And in the story we have, they had to cope with the storm for most of the night. It wasn't until about 3 a.m. that Jesus came across the water to them. So they and we need faith that God is with us in the storm and will not allow us to be overcome, even when the storm is at its worst. So, Jesus comes across the water to them. And we're thinking, oh, good, they'll know they're rescued. Well, did you hear what it said? It wasn't what they were asking for or expecting. They wanted the storm to stop. And when they saw this figure coming across the water, at first they were terrified. They screamed, thinking Jesus was a ghost. I'm thinking God doesn't often answer our prayers in the way we expect. Often it's quite different. And then we read about Peter stepping out of the boat and trying to walk on water across to Jesus. Now, I'm not sure about Peter. Is he testing if it is Jesus, or is he trying to show how much faith he has? Either way, he was struggling when he tried to do it on his own, as we often do. But Jesus still cares for us, even when we fail, even when we think we'll go under. So the message I hear for today is for us to stay together in the boat. As a congregation and as a community, we're all in the same boat. And no matter how difficult or threatening it gets, dare to believe that God is with us, and in God's own way and time will make sure that we're not overcome. More than this, as we finished our reading, we heard that once the storm had calmed and they'd got to shore, Jesus called the disciples to go with him in sharing his ministry to the people all around. That's the next thing after we come out of the storm. So I'm wondering, what's the next thing that Jesus has for us as individuals and as a congregation in ministry to the people around us when we come through the storm of this COVID-19? I look forward to finding out. God bless us all. So, in the midst of this week, whether it's a big storm or a passing squall, may God's peace be with each one of us and with us all together. Peace of God be with you all.